Hey bass family, welcome to the Sounds Like Ben beginner bass course. We're going to take you from picking up a bass from the first time and help you get your groove on. Over here on my left, your right, is the headstock. This part is known as the neck, this kind of long baseball bat shaped thing. And then you have the body here. Okay, we'll get into a little more detail on each of them. Let's start with the headstock. These are your tuning pegs. You're going to have one tuning peg for each string on your bass. You can see here, this string runs through and attaches to the post. Now if I turn this, listen to what happens. You can hear the pitch of the string change. In this case, it got lower. Now I'm going to turn it back the other direction. You can hear the pitch getting higher. You'll use these tuning pegs to tune your bass, usually at the beginning of a practice session. Once your strings are worn in, as long as these pegs don't get bumped, you'll find your instrument will stay in tune reasonably well. All right, let's move on to the neck. Now you might notice that the front of your neck, on what's called the fingerboard here, is a different color of wood than what's on the back of the neck. It's a different kind of wood actually. This neck has a maple neck with mahogany, what are called stringers, these stripes, right? And it has a rosewood fingerboard. Now you might have a rosewood or a maple fingerboard or some other piece of wood, okay? They just each give a little bit different sound and they each have their own advantages. The little metal bumps here that run across the fingerboard are called frets. Now you'll notice that the first one down here is not metal, there's plastic, it could be made of bone, could be made of something else, it might be white, black, could even be made of metal, but you'll notice that it's a little bit thicker. This is called the nut. If you see a notation that says play 0 on a string, they're talking about playing the string open without using any of the other frets. These little circles here are called position markers, and they're at the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 12th, and then the pattern repeats, right? So the 15th, same as 12 plus 3, the 17th, the 19th, and the 21st. Your bass may have 20 frets, it may have 24 frets, this one has 21. These frets are used to change the pitch of the note you're playing on a given string. Listen here. On the body of the instrument, you'll have pickups. You might have one pickup. This style is called a P pickup. Or you might have two pickups. You could have two that are straight lines like this. These are referred to often as jazz pickups. Okay? Or you might have ones that look like a little bit wider of a square than this. Those are referred to as soap bars. This is your pick guard. Helps keep the finish from getting scratched if you're playing with a pick or if you're slapping and popping. Here you have what's called the bridge. The bridge has a few parts. This is the bridge plate, right? And then these are called the saddles, right? The saddles are used for adjustment of how your bass plays, as well as how your bass plays in tune, especially further up the neck. This bridge allows for strings to be run either through the end of the bridge or through the body. In this case, I have them running through the body. And then you're going to have some type of controls. I'll show you how these work. For me, this first knob is the volume for this pickup. Quieter, louder. Then I have the volume for the rear pickup. Okay. And then I have a tone control. This tone control is a lot like on your car stereo if you're turning up or turning down the treble. Here with the treble all the way up, you have a brighter sound, and as I roll that treble back, a little bit of what's called a darker sound. Wrapping up the parts, on the back of the bass, you have your neck joint. That's where the neck meets the body. In this case, I have a bolt-on neck joint. This bass happens to have 6 bolts, some might have fewer, some may have more. Some might not have bolts at all, and it might be glued on. They're all good options, just with slightly different sounds. Let's talk about how to hold the bass. Okay, so first things first, you want your back to be straight, and you want your knees more or less parallel with the ground. I don't recommend playing for extended periods with your legs crossed. Although you can play this way, later on this can lead to back problems. All right, so we've got a nice and even posture. My feet are spread out about shoulder width apart. Now we're putting the bass on. So I've got a nice simple strap for my bass, and it's at a height that whether I'm standing or sitting, the bass stays in the same position. You may see some bass players that wear their bass very high or conversely very low. I don't recommend either as a starting point, as they'll limit your technique options. All right, let's talk about a few angles on the bass. As I'm sitting here, I've got the bass at about a 45-degree angle with the neck coming out over my left knee. This is a good neutral position. If the bass is too flat against my body, you can see that it brings my elbow and my right shoulder forward. Conversely, if the bass is straight out, it's very hard to reach those bottom frets. Pay attention to the angles of your wrists. You don't want to have a sharp crook or bend in your wrist. This can put stress on your tendons here and lead to injury. Similarly, with your left hand, you'll form your hand in the shape of a C with your thumb behind your middle finger. I'm going to do this with my hand on top of the neck so you can see this more easily. As my hand moves down towards the nut, my thumb is tilting towards the headstock, right? So I'm almost rotating kind of like this, right? This helps me avoid coming down with a very sharp bend in my wrist. It would lead to the same types of problems that I was talking about with the right wrist. You don't want to do that. There's an alternate way to hold your bass. This is referred to as the classical position, and this is derived from classical guitar. Instead of putting the bass on your right leg, you're going to move the bass and put it on your center leg. Often you'll have your knee propped up on a footstool. In this case, the bass is running directly out to my left, but you'll notice that it also has an increased angle up. It's not heading straight out at a 45-degree angle. It would be too hard to reach down to the bottom frets there, right? So you've got your bass on your left knee at an angle. Now, some advantages to this are, for the right hand, it's much easier to maintain a straight wrist. And for the left hand, when you're getting up to the higher frets, it's not being blocked by your body as much as it would in this more standard playing position. Either position is fine, and depending on the songs you're playing and what register you're playing on the bass, you may find one position more useful for you than the other. That's fine. The main thing is to watch those wrist angles and try and minimize tension. All right, finally, let's talk about directions on bass. Up means down, down means up. It's a topsy-turvy world. Let's get into this. Whenever someone's referring to playing lower or higher on bass, what they're talking about is pitch. So if you imagine speaking in a very deep voice, this is your low voice. And if I was speaking in a very high voice, I'm up here. Oh, hi, kids. Right? So similarly, you have your low note on bass. In this case, that's a low E. And up here, that's my highest E, 3 octaves higher. So if someone says go up the neck, you're traveling from your lower notes up to your higher notes and back down. Okay. Now, if someone talks about going across the neck and they say, for example, go up a string, then you're actually moving towards the floor, but up in pitch. So here, now I'm moving the next string up, the next string up, and the next string up. So these are E, A, D, G, right? It can be a little bit weird at first to hear someone say move up, but you're actually going closer to the floor. That's what they mean. Similarly, if you're holding your bass kind of like this at an angle, and someone says go up the neck, again, your hand is technically moving closer to the floor, but they're not talking about up or down in that way. They're talking about pitch, low and high. All right, I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to click like and gently touch subscribe to get notified about more bass-related videos. Right now I recommend you jump into the next video in the series, which talks about how to pluck the bass. Thanks, and take it easy.